Good day from CSG headquarters in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm Sean Sloan, Senior Policy Analyst at the Council of State Governments, and I staff the Workforce of Tomorrow subcommittee of CSG's Future of Work National Task Force. One of the policy areas the subcommittee is focused on is how state government and its partners can help to foster lifelong learning, something we know is going to be necessary for the workforce of tomorrow as they face a world of work that is increasingly dynamic and uncertain in the years ahead. The subcommittee is keenly interested in figuring out how to best support partnerships that allow students and workers to attain new competencies and credentials and master new skills over the course of their lives and careers. In addition, the subcommittee is interested in redefining metrics of success for lifelong career readiness so that we're no longer necessarily using just a standardized test score or a letter grade or a GPA to define a person's worth and using those as a bar to entry to further education or to the workforce. I'm talking today with Stacy Caldwell, the Chief Executive Officer of the Mastery Transcript Consortium, an initiative that perhaps more than any other we've come across exists in the sweet spot between the subcommittee's two policy focuses. Stacy, first of all, welcome. What is the Mastery Transcript Consortium and why is it necessary?
First of all, hi, Sean, and thank you very much for the opportunity. So the Mastery Transcript Consortium, or the MTC, is a growing group of high schools that are building and co-designing a new digital transcript that will allow each and every student's unique strengths, abilities, interests, and histories to be really supported, understood, and celebrated. And if I back up and give you just a little bit more background on that, I doubt that we'll have much debate about the idea that we all know school can and needs to continue to evolve. School can happen differently. We know that students increasingly are going to need skills like communication, creative problem solving, the ability to apply academic concepts in new and novel settings as they go through their lives and careers. And we know that in order to support that sort of work and support deeper learning, we actually know what works. We know that students should be met where they are. They should be allowed to really build on their strengths. We know that students pursuing projects and solving real world problems where they're able to really pursue and build a passion and both define and build their own knowledge, that leads to deeper learning, deeper understandings, and the sort of skills that students need in an ongoing way. So, we see a lot of schools in our network that are actually doing the work to make school happen in this way. But what happens is if schools are out doing that work and students are doing amazing cross-disciplinary projects, solving a problem in their community, if they have to then turn around and translate that back into existing structure, so they have to translate an amazing project into, hey, I need to count so many hours towards, say, an algebra grade or hours towards a history grade and reduce it to a grade as opposed to the rich work that's done, that tends to put a boulder in the way. And so our members are really saying, hey, we're doing the great work to make school happen differently. Let's make sure we're starting to put in place the structural supports that lets this really be sustainable. And that's really the work of the MTC.
Yeah. So what does the Mastery transcript itself look like, and how is it different from how transcripts have worked in the past?
Sure. So the idea of the Mastery transcript is really that it's a game changer. So we're moving from, think about the transcripts that we all know. It's typically a single page, and there are two sets of information. There are courses. These are single subject courses, and there are grades. And typically the way that students get credit is for spending a certain number of hours in a course. So it's, sort of hours sitting in and around instruction, as opposed to any sort of sense of student achievement or student mastery. So single subject and grades, and typically limited to academic subjects. That's the traditional transcript. Moving to a Mastery transcript, first of all, we're moving to a new way of assigning credit. And so rather than credit for time sitting in a course, students now get credit for achieving mastery of a certain mastery area, mastery credit area. Some schools would call them competency areas or proficiency areas. But think about these as typically cross-curricular, cross-subject credit areas that a school has deemed important for all of their graduates to know. In order to achieve the credit, it's binary. Students have to demonstrate through their work that they've actually achieved mastery at a level defined by the school. So schools define a rubric, define a level that says, hey, this is what sufficient for mastery is. Once the student hits it, they get credit for that. So if you roll that up into a mastery transcript, you now have a digital interactive transcript where students get credit for mastery, where they typically have cross-disciplinary credits, and they will show and they will get credit for in most of our schools for skills beyond the traditional academic knowledge. So in designing the transcript, there are a few things that we've thought about. First, first concept is there's no grades and there are no GPA. So what we want to show in our transcript is the actual work that the student has done. We want to show the credits that they've achieved. What we are working hard to do is say, hey, let's not let that get reduced into a single number, because that doesn't fit the model of what we're really trying to support in terms of the deeper learning. Second, the transcript, we have designed it to be flexible but consistent. So there will be a range of different credit models depending on the school and the state. But what we want to build some consistency into it so that colleges, employers, others can look at the transcript and quickly get a picture of the student. It will be student-centric but contextual, and also compact but layered. So I'll try to give you, I can pass on the visuals for folks if you want to post it, but just to give you a little picture, try to paint in words what this looks like. Let's use the example of an admissions officer. When an admissions officer logs in, the summary page that they would go to of the transcript reader application really looks like a data dashboard. So in the middle is a graphic that shows the number of mastery credits that a student has earned. So a quick visual way to see how many credits the student has learned. Those will typically be divided at the very least into foundational credits and advanced credits, where foundational credits are the credits that a school is defined to say, hey, these are the credits that I want all the students in my school to have been able to achieve in order to graduate from this high school. Fits with their portrait of a graduate and the work that they want a student to do. And then a student can take on a range of advanced credits, and these would be above and beyond graduation requirements, but they would really allow a student to pursue their interest or passion in a deeper way. So when you're looking at the transcript, front and center, you see the number of credits, you see how many broken down into credit areas. So think of those as sort of broadly defined content areas. And you'll be able to quickly see how many advanced credits and where a student is focused. So, you know, the result here is that you can quickly get a picture of where the student's interests have been and really what they've achieved, and in many ways a much richer picture of the student than what you typically get now, which is, hey, this student has taken a bunch of advanced courses, but they frankly look exactly like the courses that 10 other top students that my school has taken. Below that, then, sort of summary credit profile are really easy ways to dig into the data. So if you click on a credit area, you can very quickly below see the sorts of credits that a school has defined, and you can start to see the evidence that a student has put together to say, yes, I've achieved mastery of that. Each of these you can dig into in more detail. So you can dig into a credit area, or you can dig into a specific credit. Click on that, understand what the school has defined as the credit. You can understand what the rubric is that the school pulled together. And then you can see the specific pieces of evidence that a student utilized, as well as the one that the student would highlight as their best example of work that really fit that credit profile. You know, other things that we're building in, of course, the school profile, so that the school can give a sense for, you know, why they've defined the credits in the way that they have, and what both admissions officers and career folks should really take from what the students have been able to do. So hard to do in words, but hopefully that gives a little bit of a picture for what the transcript, how different this transcript really is.
Absolutely. So what's the status as far as acceptance of the Mastery Transcript at this point? How many schools are you working with, and, you know, how is it being received by the higher education community?
Sure, and that is one of the biggest proof points for sure that we have and will continue to have. So we currently are a growing organization of high schools. So we have 299 high schools that are in the Mastery Transcript Consortium right now. That continues to grow each year. And we are just this spring also opening up to, based on a lot of conversation and demand, a lot of middle schools have also said, hey, this is work that we want to be able to do. So we are sort of opening up to them, and I expect in the next few weeks to be able to share how many middle schools have joined as well. Of those about 300 schools, we are in our pilot year for, we called last year our design and development year. So we worked with all the schools to make sure that we were actually building this out, both from a gathering perspective and a reading perspective, a high school perspective and a college and a career perspective, to make sure that we were both gathering the information that was most relevant and showing it in a way that that worked for folks. So last year was our design year. This year is our making things real year. So turning theory into practice year, if you will. So we have 4 pilot schools, 4 pilot high schools that are actually delivering transcripts as part of their live application, admissions for college application process with their seniors this year. So out of that, we think that we'll have slightly over 80 colleges who will have received transcripts this year. And we've been working really hard to get to and talk with as many of those 80 as we possibly can. And it's been a really, really positive year, both a learning year, but also really good in terms of the results. So very, very consistently, all of the colleges that have received the transcripts have been willing to engage with them and have used them in the admission cycle. We are, still relatively early in the process, but we have about 20 acceptances that we know of so far, and that continues to grow. That continues to grow every week, and as we get into March and April, that'll grow pretty significantly. And then we've had just a series of really, really good conversations with colleges. So, my summary here is, we're still early, but thus far the data is very, very encouraging. Colleges are accepting this. And when you get a chance to spend 30 minutes with the admissions team, they really quickly get the value of why this gives a richer picture of the student and more information for them to utilize, frankly, in both the admissions cycle, but also in the ways they think about supporting students.
Mm-hmm. So how do you scale up from this pilot year? How does the Mastery Transcript move beyond the pilot stage? And then, where does the process go from here? And do you see challenges ahead?
Well, so yes, for sure there will continue to be challenges, but I'm excited about our growth trajectory. So we should move from the 4 pilot schools to about a dozen high schools that are delivering transcripts, live transcripts as part of their admissions process next year. Our membership itself continues to grow, and we think we'll continue to see an increasing number of high schools that are joining the consortium and working through their journey to mastery. I think that we will come out of this year with a lot of really positive stories from the early responses from higher ed, and all that will do will accelerate the number of high schools who, frankly, there are a number of high schools who have been working through this, who have no doubt that moving towards mastery learning is the right model for their students. But, especially for schools who have been very successful within the existing system, there's some understandable nervousness about moving from the existing model into the new model. And so the more that we can show these early successes, the more I think that will give these folks confidence to actually make the move that they fully believe is right for students, and make them understand that they can do it and help move the system more broadly. The other thing I would say is the other piece of growth that we're really excited about is, we have focused on the core of the transition between high school and college and the college admissions process, because we believe that's a really big influencer to what happens in high schools. And so, both it can be a big inhibitor, but we think if we can get college admissions folks really accepting and valuing what the MTC is, what the transcript is delivering, what our schools are delivering, that it can really accelerate the movement towards mastery learning. So, we have been really strongly focused as sort of that as a core element, but always right behind that, we have been trying to work with industry folks, career folks, et cetera, to say, hey, let's make sure we continue to build the alignment, and let's also build the transcript out in a way that students could use it essentially as a first resume, that they could use it as a tool that shows their credentials, whether they be from school or an internship or other programs that they've taken on, and really paints a picture of the student that they could use to go get an internship, use to go get a job, really sets them up for this, their lifelong learning journey. Would you like me to go ahead and talk a little bit about the challenges and what we see as well?
Sure.
Okay, great. So, in terms of challenges, I think, when you step back and you look at this is really a paradigm shift that we all are undertaking. And while there are a lot of really good members of our organization and other folks who are really supporting mastery learning, competency learning, and pushing it the right direction, it's still a really big paradigm shift. So when you think about that, there are a number of things that need to continue to shift to really support this work in an ongoing strategic way. So, it's everything, it's little things from, we have built school buildings and school schedules to be optimized around single schedules. And so single course schedules. So we need to be able to shift and adjust that, and that takes some time and energy. Most learning management systems are built around courses and grades. Most schools of education are training teachers to be teachers in single subjects, and a lot of, frankly, teacher accreditation models, especially in high school, have teachers licensed to teach in a specific subject. So those are all the sorts of things, when you look more broadly, that we think, we need to continue to build the movement and build the support. And if we can do that, then if we can get enough folks headed this direction, we think all those other pieces, frankly, will start to come in line as well as more and more schools move this direction.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the 299 high schools on board, and by my count, and I don't know if this is still accurate, but based on what's on the website, it looks like you have either founding schools or member schools in about 37 states. So, a couple of questions. Are schools coming to you now, or are you still trying to choose selectively and actively recruit new skills? And then, of the states that don't currently have member schools, is that due to any particular shortcomings or policies that may be lacking in those states?
Sure. So, in terms of recruiting schools, yes, we are actively welcoming and recruiting schools. The way that we typically, but we're doing that as a nonprofit who's trying to grow our membership responsibly. So, so the way that we're doing that is typically schools contact us if they have heard about the movement from another high school, or if they have seen one of us or heard about the Mastery Transcript Consortium at a education conference, at a learning event, those sorts of things. So, and then we are also hosting, some broader webinars. So I say that to say, we are actively outreaching to folks and talking with folks every single day about joining the conversation, becoming a member, beginning their journey to mastery. But this is far from a traditional sort of, this is far from a traditional, hey, let's go make sure that we've touched every high school in America, because frankly, we're looking for the folks who have the energy and the commitment and are beginning to think about how they really transition to mastery learning. So yes, we are actively recruiting folks, and we anticipate that we will absolutely continue to grow, both as this movement grows and as more and more schools hear about the work that we're doing. In terms of how this work clusters, I think you're right to point out that the states who have been early drivers in the competency and proficiency education models movement, and folks that are more recently supporting movement that direction, we tend to have larger clusters of schools within those areas. So, for example, the state of Utah has been pursuing innovation around mastery and proficiency learning. They've done a particularly interesting job because they're both supporting it with grants at the K-12 level, but then they've also made sure that their policy work around the higher ed sphere, they have basically put into legislation that higher ed admittances and scholarships will allow for mastery-based models as well. So they're a particularly interesting case, and as we were named by the state as one of the folks that could provide supports for high schools, we have about 23 high schools in Utah. So that's an example of a cluster. Vermont and New Hampshire we're early to the mastery learning, proficiency learning model, so we tend to have a lot of schools in the Northeast as well. In terms of states where we have fewer or no members, some of that is policy, but some of that is also just, there are places where folks are not yet aware of our work. So we continue to look for ways to broaden our reach, broaden knowledge that folks have of the MTC, and we think that will continue to grow organically.
Mm-hmm. So in your conversations with your member schools, what do you hear from them about their reasons for getting involved with the consortium, and what were their hopes for how this new transcript could impact their students and serve the workforce of tomorrow in those states?
Sure. So the individual schools play out a version of the conversation that we've been having here today. So individual schools, individual school leaders, individual school faculties, in most of the schools that we're working with, tend to have had a realization, or dawning realization, a growing realization, that they want to adjust the way that school happens for their students. And that could be driven by, there are a set of students that aren't being reached, and so they really want to shift the way that they're personalizing education and allowing students to build on their strengths so that they can really meet students where they are and make sure that they're moving them forward. In some of our schools are facing the fact that there is a growing set of mental health issues where their students are, almost playing a game of Pokemon, pursuing every academic credential that they can and feeling an incredible amount of pressure to be perfect, frankly, at the expense of actually understanding their interest and really pursuing deeper learning. And so these schools take a look at those situations and say, hey, we think we can do this differently. We think that we can engage our students with community-centered problem-solving projects. We think we can engage our students by moving out of traditional lectures and really allowing students to create the sort of micro projects and micro work that they need to do to really both build on their strengths and interests, but get the range of skills that they need. When the schools do that, when they start to say, hey, this is work I want to do, their next question or their next thought is, great, now this is going so well. I am amazed by what I'm seeing out of my students. Now I want to be able to reflect that more broadly, and I want to be really able to show the full picture of the student. So our early schools, who were the pilot schools, who are in many cases built from the ground up to do mastery-based learning, those schools are fully convinced not only in the model, but they're also fully convinced that if you're going to do school this differently, they really want to represent the full range of what the student's been able to do. Other schools who are sort of midway through their transition are just now understanding the power of mastery learning and are really have in many cases joined the network so that they can continue to support this work more broadly and support the policy supports, the structural supports, the sort of conversations with colleges that the consortium is able to have as a whole. But that they also enjoy the community aspect. There's somebody else who's starting in middle school. There's somebody else who has, half their faculty on board and half of their faculty saying, half their faculty or teachers saying, hey, I don't know, this is not the way that I've been teaching for the last 20 years. And they need to make sure that they have effective ways of working through that together. So I think that network effect of, hey, I can gather together with other school leaders doing this work, work through it with them, and at the same time support this broader movement and the broader conversation so that we're building the structural supports. Those are really the sort of things that folks are truly valuing.
Yeah. You mentioned that there have been some states who've been sort of out front in terms of how they're thinking about mastery-based, proficiency-based, competency-based education. So what's sort of the state policy agenda or the best practices to help pave the way for the Mastery Transcript? Are there ways that state governments can help, whether through legislation or state education policy or just encouraging more schools to get on board?
Absolutely. The role that state government plays here is huge and crucial. So when we think about the sorts of things that can really support mastery learning, there's sort of three broad areas that we tend to think about. So number one, number one is states can think about broadening their definition of student success to really include a holistic range of the skills that students need for success in college, career, and life. If you think about the work that is accomplished with mastery learning, you think about all the things that employers are saying they need in terms of problem-solving skills, people who are good teammates, people who can be creative and find new solutions to existing problems. Those are not things that are typically just easily found or translated in a single subject-based set of success metrics. And so broadening a bit what we're looking at. Schools are doing it anyway, but we would do it more consistently and I think in a higher quality way if to the degree that states are broadening their definitions of success to really include that. The second thing would be, and this is where I think a lot of progress has been made, and I'd like to broaden I think we would like to see the amount of progress broadened here, is granting of credits based on measurable student achievement rather than seat time. And here we do see a lot of places where states have allowed for crediting based on proficiency or crediting based on competencies. I think where it can be expanded is states need to look at the full range of things that constrain how high school happens. So what does that mean? That means graduation requirements. So if you allow proficiencies, but graduation requirements mean that you have to have certain courses, that's not as supportive as it could be. We've talked about crediting, like how you actually get credit and how that relates to graduation requirement. But then there's also thinking about the higher ed aspect and what admissions requirements are. So, there are a number of states where they may have proficiency models, but their state scholarship program, their state merit aid program is entirely dependent on a GPA. And so that's an example where they've sort of shifted policy in one area, but the policy in higher ed that might support that sort of full move to mastery is not quite where it should be. So we'd love to see admissions policies, scholarship policies, graduation requirements, crediting, all sort of line up around that. And then the third one, closely behind that, or frankly not even behind it, but the third one in a related way is funding models. So if funding models are still based on seat time, it doesn't support the move to sort of in-school and out-of-school richer education models that you could otherwise build. So we also would like to see funding models moving to supporting the work of mastery schools that really value student achievement, but also that makes the way for a school that is managing students who are spending 2 days in the community, either working on entrepreneurial projects with folks and or working on internships, but doing that in a way that is sort of heavily tying back to and engaged with and guided by the school. Funding models that support that and don't hurt schools who have said, yes, let's make the space for students to get out into the outside the four walls. And then, so that's, I would say, the three that really, broadly we try to support. And then, the fourth one, and again, this is my sort of what's core versus and how do we move to the next level. We think that one of the really exciting possibilities of mastery learning and the mastery transcript is that we can begin to provide credentials and credit for all of the skills and achievements that a student has, and really open up a full range of opportunities. So Yes, we focused on admissions, but we've talked about the sort of lifelong learning, the opportunity to do internships. So the other thing that, in general, we try to support is where states can work to align their K-12 higher ed and workforce initiatives so that, career initiatives can be connected to and funding some of the great work going on in high schools, et cetera. Lining those three things up is historically very, very difficult, but to the degree that states can look for ways to align those policies, that tends to get the most traction in our view.
Great. Well, Stacy, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and providing your perspective, which will help greatly to inform the work of our subcommittee and task force going forward. Best of luck with the Mastery Transcript Consortium. I'm Sean Sloan at CSG headquarters in Lexington. Thanks for listening.